What I'd like to do is actually pick up on what we heard this morning regarding the contribution that a study of the brain and neuroscience can make to some of these age-old problems. And ask the question, what is the basis, the neuroscientific basis at the level of the physical brain that could be related to views of virtue? Especially in the 21st century, as we face a world where on the one hand people are anticipating kids are going to become like cyborgs, or are they going to become the passive recipients of a very aggressive technology? And in either case, are they going to be virtuous or not virtuous, and how can we mitigate against this? So, forgive me those of you who are demon neuroscientists and psychologists, but there may be those who are not familiar with the wonderful thing about the mammalian brain particularly, and par excellence the human brain, which is that when you're born with pretty much all the brain cells you'll ever have, but it's the growth of the connections between the brain cells after birth that accounts for its size. So you can see here it is the proliferation of the connections, not the cells themselves, that is really the distinguishing feature of the brain as it grows. And this means even if you're a clone, an identical twin, you will have a unique configuration of brain cell connections postnatally, because these in turn are shaped by experience, a term known as neuronal plasticity, from the Greek plastikos, to mold. So the old idea, the old dichotomy of mental versus physical, of mind versus brain, I would challenge that. Yes, for sure, we don't know yet exactly what's happening, but that doesn't mean to say that you have on the one hand the airy-fairy philosophical abstract world, and on the other hand the squalor of the physical brain. Clearly the one does relate to the other, and it's a challenge of neuroscience to actually talk to humanities and philosophy people to try and work out how the one is related to the other. So I'd like to suggest that the biological basis of the mind is not some dichotomous alternative to the philosophy, but rather it's the personalization of the brain through these unique dynamic configurations of connections, driven in turn by unique experiences. But the one area I'd like to focus on is perhaps at the very heart of virtue, which is your identity and the person that you are. Are we facing not so much a cyborg future, but more one where the personality is perhaps more passive? And that's what I'd like to explore with you. One where perhaps we're going to be in a here and now environment at the mercy of raw sensations as opposed to the cognitive. One could think almost in a very simplistic way of two modes that human beings have always done, but that might be accentuated and skewed with screen technologies. With prefrontal cortex underfunction compared to the activation, here we have strong feelings when your prefrontal cortex is fully active, thinking is dominating, therefore you can contrast sensory with cognitive, the here and now with past, present and future, the external environment driving and you're reacting to it as opposed to internal perceptions playing out. Little meaning, what you see is what you get. Here a meaning, that is to say you can think in terms of one thing symbolizing something else. Here a reduced sense of self, here a strong sense of narrative, here no time or space, you're just in the moment. Here you have clear time-space references. Indeed, lesions of prefrontal cortex can result in something called source amnesia, where you have a problem with time and space. So 5 crucial questions very quickly. We'd like to look at the effects of dopamine in very simple in vitro conditions, because that hasn't really been thought through or sought out or described properly. We'd also like to link single cells with brain imaging by means of a far less known, but to my mind very sensitive, means of looking at brain function, and that's looking at large groups of brain cells. You can see here over a very high time and space resolution that's much superior to non-invasive brain imaging, and comparing it, as is Ian's work, with a simple environment and an enriched environment where you can see that interacting with an environment and learning from it leads to a larger assembly. We'd like to compare that with simple exposures to strong sensations, more redolent of the screen technologies, and finally see when in young adults who fess up to being a long time on the screen, we do indeed see an underfunctioning prefrontal cortex. Finally, we'd like to look at the implications of this in terms of how we might maximize the chances of an individual developing their brain into a mind.